and we appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you and making yourselves accessible to us so we can come in and spend some time.
Tom, why should 23rd District voters re-elect you this time?
Well, I'll put our record up against my opponent. We, I hope, have demonstrated what I believe is our number one mission, and that is our accessibility. With over 10,000 cases that we've resolved, I know a lot of people in the community come up and we see and we try to stress to them. That's what we want to do, is be here and be available, and I think we have demonstrated some success on that level. The 200 plus town halls, out there listening to people, taking their input, taking their ideas to Washington is something that's critical to me. And as we continue forward, they started in 2010 and the job's not done yet, and I want to get this country going in the right direction, do my part, and once it's there, then we'll call it a day. But until we do that, it's just time to keep moving forward. And the support's been overwhelming. I mean, we have received a tremendous amount of support across the district, and I'm humbled by it.
What issues are you talking about in the campaign, and what issues are you finding that are resonating with?
What I'll tell you is what I hear out and about across the district. People, it all stems from an anxiety, a concern, a fear, if you would. It starts with the economy. It starts with their opportunity to have a job for their kids, for them to be able to call this place home. And now we're starting to see more and more of a concern about our national security and the issues of threats that people are seeing on American soil, and people getting concerned more and more than I've ever heard about that potentially happening here. And that's one thing I'm very sensitive to. I do recognize that those threats that we're seeing are getting higher, and we got to make sure that we're protecting our fellow citizens' safety with national security is one of the top three issues of the day. The other things that we're focused on is college affordability, getting into the issue of college costs, and we've put forward a blueprint in using the endowment space as kind of the toe in the door, so to speak, to use that as a platform to get to the overall issue of getting college costs under control.
Would one way of getting college costs under control be to allow students to refinance their debt at a lower rate
Sure.
than they're paying now?
Absolutely, and we fully support that, and we have supported that in the past, and we'll continue to support that going forward. But let's make sure we keep it in focus, because refinancing the debt, yes, it will alleviate some immediate concerns, and it needs to be done. But unless we get those college costs, and what I'm really focused on are the gross college costs. A lot of times when university presidents, college presidents come into our office, they focus on the net costs. What is the and they say affordability is based on the net cost. I'm real interested in driving the top line cost, the gross cost down, and then also having the conversation about how do we make it affordable on that net cost. And so things that we're toying with, not only the refinancing of debt at multiple whatever opportunity you can achieve, is to also tap into things immediately that deal with things like dual enrollment, which allows for acquisition of college credit during high school, so that you get as much as you possibly can there. The flexibility in the Pell Grants to go throughout the entire year, make them more open to students. But then also using the endowment space as another tool, because there's 90 institutions with $1 billion or more across the country that are sitting, and remember, these are non-for-profit institutions that get tax-deducted gifts that accumulate income on a tax-free basis. So is there an opportunity in, for example, the 90 institutions that got $1 billion or more, when they're having the returns, to force more of that money to go to tuition reduction for working families? That's what our endowment bill is all about. Then what we're also toying with is how do we get the college cost to be open and transparent? Because the more sunshine we put in this position or on this issue, it's having an impact. It's having an impact. Asking the question, why does it cost $65,000 a year to go to Syracuse University? Where's the money going? And when you see things like on the 990 forms where they bury the stuff, and those are the non-for-profit IRS forms that the institutions have to file on an annual basis, we need to make those forms much more transparent, much more simple, so people can ask the question, where's the money going? And when you see that, when you do that, like we got University of Missouri building a lazy river in the shape of with a Playboy mansion, grotto on it. I mean, is that what we want for our education tax-free dollars to go towards? I don't think so. And when you put that spotlight on them, boy, it's amazing how behavior changes real quick.
I was kind of hoping to touch on John Plum's military experience and whether you actually believe that his experience and his serving as an advisor to the Obama White House would actually be a negative in this case. You had mentioned that people are mentioning their fears of terrorism, domestic terrorism, and things like that. Do you think that that's actually his experience, your opponent's experience, is actually a negative?
Well, first, I respect his military service. I know he served 6 years, and being the son of a 20-year career Army officer, we've always been taught you respect the men and women who serve. So I appreciate the military service that he has done and respect that immensely. But I do believe he's been part of the foreign policy calculations and development of plans. He's a senior aide for the National Security Council, which is Obama's foreign policy primary vehicle to develop, and he's been part of that. And I think Obama's foreign policy has made us weaker, has made us less secure. And I think that is a contrast that I think the voters should know about, that he was part of developing President Obama's foreign policy. I think we need to adopt a position of strength. We need a position of peace through strength. And I don't think we've gotten that out of President Obama's foreign policy, and he's been part of that policy development.
In some of your campaign literature, you call him DC John. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, obviously we have a very creative campaign team, and I appreciate the work they've done, and they're trying to use that creativity to show the contrast. And what we have seen, and I think where the DC John label comes from, is what we are seeing across the country with other Democratic candidates. We see candidates that are advised by the DCCC, which is the Democratic Congressional Committee, their primary committee to elect Democratic members to Congress, is essentially when you run a race, don't say anything, don't take any positions, don't get out and throughout the district and expose yourself to that gotcha moment on camera. So what we see are candidates such as my opponent who don't take positions on issues. I've been running for well over a year, and really I have not seen many firm positions taken by our opponent, and we see this consistently with other DC candidates. And so it's kind of the say whatever you have to say to get elected, talk out of both sides of your mouth. It's a DC politics traditional model that I think he's committed to. And I think it's fair to have a debate, fair to have our record versus his position on the issues out there, and that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to develop as we go forward.
Well, piggybacking off of that, though, I just want to be absolutely sure to get it. This is your fourth go around now, your fourth election, right?
Third.
Third?
Because we had the dual election, if I remember correctly. So if I have to go back on it, so let's see, we had the special and the general, and the fourth term is kind of the one that people think of as that special election, where we went from November to December.
Okay, but you've
So
been there
2012.
you've been there for some time, and I'm not saying that you are, but kind of piggybacking off the DC John thing. How are you not DC Tom?
Yeah, well, I think as we've done these town halls, for example, the 200 plus, when I go back to DC, other members who are part of that establishment, if you would, they're always telling me, they're like, why are you going home every weekend? Why are you doing all these town halls? Why are you putting yourself out there? I go, well, because, and my response always is, look I feel an obligation. To represent people, you got to listen to people. And so, we are one of the first ones when the voting's over. We're in the car driving home. When we come home to my wife and kids in Corning, but then we get immediately up the next day and travel the district, doing the town halls, listening to people, doing events, doing public events, and really trying to bring the voice of the concerns of the people and also their ideas to Washington. So, we don't do it for the pomp and circumstance. You don't see me out there, going to the glitzy parties or anything like that down in DC. I'm back here on the weekends, and some of the guys are committed to that because that's what we need to do. We need elected officials that are staying in tune with their districts, working their districts, listening to their districts, and really focusing in on, don't become part of that DC establishment.
You ever-
Well, we're there 3 or 4 days doing the work.
Right.
You know, bringing the solutions back from the district to DC, advocating for them, voting on the floor, because obviously you have to be there to vote. And then, you know, just not being part of that.
This year seems like there's been a lot of recess though. Is there more than usual?
You know, I don't know that this is more than usual in regards to a presidential year or anything like that. But I do know that we've been home, and I think that's good. I think the more members can be in their districts, listening to the people, the stronger you are as a member. And that is something I've supported and will continue to support.
Now, of those, the hundreds of town hall meetings that you've held in your time, could you maybe cite some specific examples of solutions that your constituents have brought to your attention that you brought back that have actually worked?
Yeah.
What are some things?
So, you know, I remember one vividly. The gentleman brought up the example of a veterans check going to dead vets that he was aware of that happened, I think, with a friend of his. And we brought that back to DC and put a little spotlight on that. And that has been improved dramatically. Still room for improvement, but the death file, merging the different agencies so that they know who's passed away and who hasn't, that has improved dramatically since then. That was probably one of the first, I think that was the first year that we were there that happened. It's also, the town halls also allow us to do constituent work. I remember vividly over in Geneva, a man and his wife came in and they talked about their disabled kid who was trying to get into Keuka College, and because of the paperwork bureaucracy that they had with the Social Security Department, he couldn't get the resources in order to do that he obviously rightfully deserved. And so I remember holding that father in that town hall meeting, and then going back to DC and kicking the paperwork and kicking the red tape and getting that child in a position where he was much better off than before they came to the town hall. So those are the things that I've been pleased to be part of when that happens. And then a lot of times in the town halls we get the ability, and people appreciate this, I think, because they've said it, is a lot of times they disagree with where I may come down on an issue, and like you say, we'll go into a part of the district that's more left-leaning. You know, we'll go to Tompkins County, that area, but we still show up, and I think that's a good way to do it, because then people come back and they say, well, you know, I disagree with you, but I understand what you're thinking. I understand why you're thinking where you are. You know, they're going to keep working on me, is what they say, and but they understand we're trying to find that common ground.
If Donald Trump were passing through doing his rallies, and it's unlikely, but if, say in a larger area in your district, would you want him to stand up, and would you want to be there with him during this campaign time?
Well, Jim, I'll tell you, I've endorsed him, and that's another thing. People have asked, you know, where we stood on the endorsement, and when asked about it, you know, we supported Bush in the beginning, and that clearly didn't go anywhere. And when 15 million people spoke, and people asked where we stood, we answered them, and we said we endorsed him. And I would stand with him coming through here. I meet with his campaign when we're in DC. We have a weekly campaign meeting there, and I choose to use our role in the campaign in a private way, not going through the press, not going through because that's not who I am. And so if he came into town, I would welcome him to the area. I'd be an ambassador for the area. I would show the area off because I'm so proud of it to him. And I think he would get what we're talking about. And I'll tell you, the support for Donald Trump that I've seen across the district has been strong, because I think he represents what I'm primarily attracted to him about, in that when you're choosing between Hillary Clinton, status quo establishment, versus agent of change disruptor that Donald Trump is, I'm part of that effort to change DC. It has to change, and we've done some things since 2010, but we need somebody in the White House that is not going to maintain the status quo.
Have you tried to, in any way, send or articulate some kind of message that you wish perhaps there was more focus on issues rather than some of the distractions that have occurred?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've weighed in privately with them, and also I think on the last press call, I think you may have asked the question, Rick, if I remember correctly. About my advice for the finish line is focus on the issues. Focus on the issues that the American people deal with on a day-to-day basis, and that's where we tried to encourage him and his team to focus. And we've all had concern about the rhetoric and tone at times that he expresses, and we'll weigh in on that. But I'm not going to go out publicly and engage in the the high-profile spotlight type of driven. Sometimes I see with people that are being part of this cycle in order to achieve, and that's just not who I am.
You can do that here.
I just don't do it that way.
What are a couple of issues, through the sort of the braying and what are some of the issues that you wish were pushed more to the forefront in terms of some of the, like the debates or even, some of the discourse, like through the media,
Yeah, I would hope, given his private sector background, his more focus on anything that's going to grow jobs for people across America. Focus, that to me, and I hear it across the district, that's the number one issue. Jobs, opportunity for people to be able to take care of themselves. That's what they're looking for, that's what they want, and I think that's the strongest message he offers. He's that private sector based guy who's trying to bring that mentality to Washington, D.C. So I think if he could focus there, and by that I mean, focus on the broken tax code and how to reform it and fix it. How to get the regulatory environment under control and make it more reasonable base as opposed to excessive that I see it today. His commitment to energy, it is clear. He is committed to energy development from U.S. sources, and that includes everything from what I can see from his positions on the issues. So I'm attracted to that all of the above energy policy, which I myself support, that I think he could articulate.
Including coal then?
All of the above, yeah, coal and the fossil fuels. But just recently, I think yesterday we were given the Solar Champion Award in D.C. So we have done it based on our record by the Solar Association, and so we have been a strong proponent of an all of the above, and not just saying it, but backing it up. At the end of the year last year, we did the investment tax credit and the production tax credit. We were critical as part of that, and the tax code getting those extended and having the wind and solar be part of the development of that all-above energy strategy.
What about the trade talk? I know, going back, and forgive me if I'm not, catching or that I remember exactly, but it seems like it's a little bit of a departure or a little bit of an about face, for the party and maybe even somewhat for yourself. If, the sort of like the push towards, now, things like NAFTA and international trade are being looked upon with more scrutiny, and, Donald Trump is tossing them up as being, detrimental to our economy.
Yeah, well, no, obviously, I think we all have to agree, with 95% of the world's consumers living outside of America's borders, a policy that says all we are going to do is trade amongst the 300 plus Americans, and that somehow is going to lead us to a more prosperous, bigger opportunity economy for our fellow American citizens, that's just not realistic. And so you need access to those world markets. You need to make sure that, I'm a big believer of U.S. manufacturing, where we make it here in order to sell it around the world, and sell it there is what I often say. And so opening those trade barriers is something I'm generally going to be supportive of. And I think you see that with Donald Trump too, when he talks about, accessing those markets in an open, fair, enforceable manner. That's what my standard's always been, and that's what I believe we need to be doing. And that's when the issues of TPP came into the forefront. That is, I think, what Donald Trump is tapping into, is that this agreement was negotiated not with America's workers' interest put first and foremost as the priority. Essentially, as I saw it, dealing with Mike Froman, who's the American Trade Ambassador, who works with us on the committee, because we're responsible for trade in the House. When I talked to Mike before, the deal was really struck in Atlanta at about 3 o'clock in the morning. They rolled it out over in the EU, but as he was going to Atlanta to finalize this thing, I said to him, look, I have grave concerns. I'm hearing things where you're going on intellectual property, currency manipulation, dairy access, and I'm very sensitive to dairy access for our farmers here in Western New York, especially to Canada. And you got to remember, this is a multi-nation negotiation with 12 different countries. So this isn't like prior trade agreements. I mean, this is probably the biggest trade agreement I believe that's ever been negotiated. And I said, when you go there, I'm really concerned how you're going to cut this deal. And it was clear to me when he came back, he's like, Tom, do you really think that we can do any better? We're out of time. That said something to me. What that said to me was, and as I looked at him, I said, no, you're out of time. We're not out of time. You're out of time, being you're part of the Obama administration, and you're going down there in order to cut a deal because the clock is running on your administration. You got to get this right. And so that's where we pushed them. And when they came back and we had a chance to read that agreement, when it was and made available to everyone, I clearly saw those three issues in particular, as well as others. The deal was struck just to strike a deal and not to make those markets accessible for us, with American interest being first and foremost in the negotiations.
Just a quick Route 219 question. Anything new with the state?
Yeah. Yeah, we've been working with them, with the Continental One Group and with the governor's office, and we missed the window on this go around with the highway bill, but I think we're positioned very well talking to the stakeholders in regards to that rural significant funding that we were able to push Bill Schuster to put in the bill for the 5-year highway bill. And so I think we're in a good position for the next year's go around to continue to advance the ball on 219, at least get these studies done, and working with the nation. That is something also we're very proud of. We've become kind of a lack of a better term, we've been kind of a ambassador, if you would, with the nation and develop a working relationship with them. I feel very comfortable picking up the phone, for example, and talking to Mo John and as the president of the nation and say these are concerns. And when we dealt with the I-86 situation, we worked with him hand in hand in regards to the sales tax money, and then we freed that up when we said enough is enough. When that one accident happened with that mom and that family, that's when I said, look, enough of these games. We got to get this road fixed. And we did. And so, those are some roadblocks that we see, but I think we are in a very good position to make some substantial headway on moving 219 forward with the way we did the highway bill.
And I just had another question on veterans and Donald Trump. He had some recent remarks about PTSD that were seen as demeaning to veterans who returned with it. How would you describe that? It's kind of like a stream of consciousness, but it certainly wasn't scripted or anything. It was off the cuff, and it clearly didn't gain him any friends with families of veterans with PTSD. How would you describe this? And is there anything that, again, I'll ask you, that he would say that would cause you to give pause to your support of him?
No, I just gotta, as I see the choice, this is a binary choice, Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. And given Hillary Clinton's track record, her issues with classified material, the email service, let's say that arrogant, above the law attitude, if that becomes ingrained in Washington, I'm concerned about the future. So obviously, the tone and rhetoric that Donald Trump has indicated at times, we've expressed our concern with that, but we've tried to use the position in a private, productive manner, and we'll continue to do that as we go forward. But as to the issue of veterans and PTSD, obviously, we have stood with vets. I go to Walter Reed, go stand with our wounded warriors. I'll never forget going there and seeing my first quadruple amputee. With his wife on subsequent visit. I mean, they are the individuals that inspire me the most in Washington.
And that's why I wondered specifically what you thought of Donald when he said that.
I obviously, I didn't see the whole exchange. I didn't see the whole concern. I saw more reports on it rather than exactly what context that was being given in and what was the give and take. And there's no doubt Donald Trump, and I think some people are attracted to him just because of that stream of conscious, not that political polish, politically correct speech that so many people in America require of elected officials, and I think that sometimes is an asset that he brings to the table. But then sometimes there's concerns. But when it comes to our vets, I think there's broad agreement that PTSD is real. That's why I'm so proud of the work. It's not in the district, but it used to be the Canandaigua Vet Center. The call center up there, what they're doing there, what's going on in Batavia, what's going on in the research and development in regards to treating PTSD. There are some exciting things going on there because it's real. It needs to be dealt with. And my dad came back from World War II in Korea, and I can remember my older brothers and sisters relaying to me stories about him waking up in cold sweats. He was a Silver Star recipient. He died with shrapnel still coming out of him and having night terrors and waking up, and they tell us those stories. And that's PTSD, and they used to just say nothing about it back in the day. So we've come a long way. We've got a long way to go, and we're going to be part of making sure the vets get the resources they need to not only take care of PTSD, but the other wounds, the physical wounds as well as the other mental wounds that they suffered.
Sorry to keep bringing it back to Trump here, but that seems to be the MO of this whole campaign. But back to the posturing, the rhetoric, the negative tone, what some would perceive to be a negative tone. It's one thing to say some of these things to our own people, and some would say that's a very awful thing. It's another thing to have that, across borders. Maybe, do you feel? And he's repeatedly said that he does have the demeanor to be president. He has that demeanor. But what if some of that bombast comes out in a closed-door meeting with Xi Jinping over in China or something like that? Is there any concern that would yield negative consequences?
Well, I think Donald Trump, given where he's been in life and being part of negotiations with some very powerful people in the private sector, running billions of dollars worth of private sector businesses, tens of thousands of people being put to work. I think he would be in that room and be able to handle that room very well. And I will admit, I've been in meetings with him one-on-one, and as many people say, what I see one-on-one, off camera, and when the cameras aren't rolling, completely different than what I see on TV at times. TV sometimes I think he comes across as that reality TV show type thing, but in the private setting, I've seen a different person who really is taking the input from around the table and actually engaging in the conversation. So I'm not concerned about that in the sense of from what I see firsthand and given his experience in regards to putting deals together, negotiating different positions and being successful in those efforts.
Do you see any possibility of a down ballot effect in the 23rd district? People who won't vote for Donald Trump that would, might ordinarily vote for you, but you're on the same line.
You know what, Rick, I really do. Obviously, I think Hillary Clinton, and my opponent is fully embraced and endorsed Hillary Clinton as the candidate. Any impact down ballot, I could see a Hillary Clinton impact because of her track record of lying, deceiving, above the law establishment type thing. So, as my opponent has fully embraced Hillary Clinton and endorsed her, I would say that is probably more realistic in the district than the other way. I see Donald Trump is resonating very strongly with people in the district as we get out there, we talk to people, we listen to people. They're looking for that change. They are concerned that if we go down this path of continuing the debt accumulation, we continue this position of weakness on the world stage, where we don't negotiate with American workers' interests first. I think they're in the district, at least my read of it, are saying that Hillary Clinton's policies are all associated with that, and they're rejecting them.
Donald Trump's, I think this came out in the debate, presidential debate, the first one, that Trump's proposals so far, coupled between programs that he support and taxes that he would cut, would add another, I don't know, $10 billion or $10 trillion.
Yeah, this is part of the culture of DC that needs to change, to be perfectly honest with you, Rick, because a lot of times the culture of DC, it tries to restrict itself with the static scoring models that they produce, which means they don't take into consideration real life activity. They just look at the beans and they count the beans. Also, they really surround themselves with a we know it better ivory tower type of approach to these issues. And I respect the scores, but sometimes when I've gone to like people at the Congressional Budget Office and Joint Committee on Taxation, who are kind of the lead bean counters, if you would, it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense that if we, for example, we wanted our continuous glucose monitoring bill that we're trying to push, and we got huge bipartisan support, and that allows for better control of diabetes for people that are Medicare eligible and give them the resources. When I go to CMS and the Congressional Budget Office and they say, well, Tom, that's going to cost X hundreds of millions, and billions, we've been tweaking with it to change the score over time. And I go, well, yeah, okay, it's going to cost that much to get that monitor to that person when they first become Medicare eligible, but they're going to have such a better outcome with their diabetes control. Their A1Cs are going to be driven down because we know this technology provides better care. And they're not going to have amputations. They're not going to go blind. They're not going to have infections that put them in the intensive care unit. And they say back to me, well, we can't take that into consideration because, that's more of a art. That's not a science. All we can do is count the amount of dollars going out the door to pay for the pump. That's how DC operates. And that's where what Donald Trump is proposing, I think it's you can get a scorekeeper to say this is what it's going to do, but try to bring some private sector-based common sense. And I'll tell you, if you put that CGM proposal, for example, to people across the town hall district in the Western New York, they go, well, of course that makes sense. It's a penny wise but a pound foolish type of attitude that DC often has, and that's part of the culture shift we're trying to do in Washington.
What's your reaction to the suggestion that police forces, both rural and urban, have racial bias against people of color, African Americans, that they're targeted in greater numbers for arrests and what some call even like harassment. How would you react to if you were in a room and that issue was raised, and what are some of the solutions, or what would you offer to that kind of climate?
Well, first, obviously, I think our men and women in blue always deserve our respect. We stand with them. We've committed. We just did a ride along the other day with the Elmira PD to see what they get exposed to on a day-to-day basis and the risk that they are exposed to. And so I think making sure people know where we stand in regards to the support of them is important, not only from myself, but as a district, as a state, and as a nation, and to show them that we appreciate the work they do and the sacrifices they endure, and we're gonna stand with them shoulder to shoulder. Now, as to the issues of the racial tension that you're getting to, and the issues that are of course, if there is any type of discriminatory bad actor, be it in law enforcement or any practice, I think that should be vigorously investigated, pursued, and once found, enforcement action, penalties, punishment be imposed vigorously. And I think we've demonstrated a record committed to that. And some folks in our party have, for example, opposed the Voting Rights Act, for example. I've been fully supportive of it. I went with John Lewis, the civil rights icon, went with him to Selma when we celebrated the anniversary of his march at Edmund Titus Bridge there. And we stood with him and said, no, we will support the Voting Rights Act. When the LGBT issue came up, for example, we were one of, I believe it was 14 Republicans that said, no, we're not going to support discrimination. We're not going to allow that to occur. And when discrimination occurs, be it because of race, be it because of other identities, we're going to call it out and hold people accountable on it. So I would hope we would be able to demonstrate to folks who are concerned about that in various parts of the district and across the state and the nation that we are going to be part of those efforts to hold folks accountable for those bad actors. But to lump them all together, and this is a concern I have with Hillary Clinton, for example, where she says there's an implicit racism across America. I reject that. I reject that. That really is a broad brush that I think offends many of us who fight day in and day out to oppose that. And and you know, as we go forward, I think that's the better approach to it.
What makes you want to, what makes you want to fight for America, fight for our district, which is like a slice of America?
It's easy, Jim. This is home. This is my home. You know, I've grown up here. My wife, born in Silver Creek and Dunkirk, lived in Hamburg, South Buffalo. I live in a house my grandpa built back in the 20s. Chose to raise my family with my wife here, Jean and I together. Watching my daughter go off to University of Buffalo. I graduated from Alfred University with my wife there. That's what it's about. The primary mission is to make sure that our interests are represented loud and clear in Washington, making sure that, you know, not only on a policy basis they're represented, but the day-to-day bureaucracy that we are a strong advocate for. That's why 10,000 cases plus, we have made that a mission in our office to be top priority and continue that effort. And when I look at my kids, you know, now going off to college and junior and high school there at Corning in the public schools, just to be able to say I did everything I possibly could to allow them the opportunity. Now, if they choose to do something differently, but at least they have the opportunity to call this place home, like I had an opportunity, and I chose to come back here and raise my family here, just so they have that opportunity. And I want to extend that opportunity to all the families that I come across in the 700,000 plus we represent. And that's what motivates me day in and day out.
I had one more that I forgot to ask.
It's okay.
Is there any room for the thought of, you know, talking about, you know, firearms in the U.S., ownership? Certainly, you know, we know your rating with the NRA, but what do you say to somebody who talks about, you know, more background checks? Is, you know, if they could be done, you know, instantaneously, in terms of, you know, at site, so that, you know, someone's rights, Second Amendment rights aren't delayed, and then about the issue with, you know, watch list, you know, that aspect of it. How is that a bad thing? How could that be argued against?
So when it comes to the Second Amendment, you know, as you point out, our rating, NRA A rating, and we are firmly committed to the Second Amendment. We stand with the Second Amendment. It is one of our fundamental freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution. And I'm proud of our record when it comes to the Second Amendment, and we'll continue to stand firm in regards to it. And I've been there. I've been with the parents of folks that have lost their child to gun violence. I held one, and she cried. She was crying. I hugged her, and she said, "I can't believe you would not support banning these guns across the board." And as I said to her, I said, you know, you and I are not too far off as to what we're working towards achieving. We want to make sure that these situations don't ever occur again. Now, what a lot of times these individuals are given is they're saying, well, if we just ban the object, then we'll guarantee it doesn't happen again. But knowing this issue and studying this issue, banning a gun is not going to solve this problem. What is going to solve this problem is do what we've been trying to do. You know, support Dr. Murphy's bill to raise mental health treatment in America, to give it the prioritization that it needs, and that it's treated just like a serious medical condition. You get the resources, you get the providers, you get the whole approach to taking on mental health. Because in these mass shooting situations, for example, the common denominator is always there's a mental health component behind the person who perpetrated these events. You know, when you talk to people that are coming out of the inner cities and they're the subject of gun violence, it is amazing to me. The reports come back, and we talk. And we've been in the inner cities as we've taken on this anti-poverty initiative that we're leading out of Washington. Inside of, you know, Cleveland, we went inner city Rochester. The criminal activity associated with the people that are using these guns in gun violence situation is consistent. They're convicted felons. They're convicted drug dealers. There's a drug component heavily to them. So there's common ground there that if we can go after the ones that perpetrate a crime with a gun, carry it out, you know, that I think is common ground. You violate our rights and you're convicted of a crime, lot of broad agreement that that's part of that we can make sure you don't have access to your constitutional rights anymore because you violated your rights by committing that criminal act. So that's where I try to spend our time, and we focus on it. You know, obviously the no-fly list situation, nobody wants terrorists to have guns, and actually that is the law. And so a lot of times what happens is these political issues rise up, and they try to be fanned in order to become political talking points and exchanges, when you look at the facts, when you look at the details, what is already there is already being done, and we just need stricter and stronger enforcement of the mechanisms that are there.
So that watch list, if somebody's on the watch list, they can't buy a gun, is that?
Yeah, if the job is being done correctly, my understanding of the NICS program and talking to gun dealers, people that are in that situation, you know, that whole no-fly list, no gun, the programs that are there, if enforced, would prevent that. And if there's need for reform out there in regards to make sure that terrorists don't get a weapon, then I'm open to that. And I'm open to making sure, but you got to be careful because you got due process rights of folks that are going through that system and that are going through that list. You know, we've had members of Congress that have been put on that list, and so and they can't get off the list because they don't know what's the process in order to do that. And so there are mechanisms there that I think could be reformed.
Come to one of your town halls and they'll take care of it.
Yeah. Well, and just you know, just if there is that area, I'm open to that. I'm open to that to make it work better. But to say we need to just go down this path and that there are folks in D.C. That are trying to arm terrorists with a gun, that's not what I find. That's not there. It's more politics than substance, and I try to focus on the substance of the issues.